6 in the I Care for Your Brain program with Dr. Sullivan. That's me. What we're going to talk about today is the importance of social connection as we grow older. We're going to focus on a couple topics, and I want to get you on board right away with what those are. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the social basis of our humanity. We are social animals, and we need to understand this at a fundamental level if we're to understand how important social health is to our overall well-being. We're going to talk about the key social skills that all of us need to master in order to get along with people in the best way possible. So many of our stressors are due to interpersonal issues with other people, either because we may have some difficulty with the social aspects of our interaction, or they might. We can't control anything about other people, so our job is to figure out how is it that we can conduct ourselves in the best possible way. I want you to understand by the end of this lecture how socialization affects all aspects of health. Now, of course, our focus together is on brain health, but one of the things you know is that all the other aspects of health cannot be ignored. We have to pay attention to every part of ourselves if our brain is truly going to experience optimal health. I want to talk to you about the benefits of community living. Now, where we live is a very personal choice, but I do have some feelings on residential communities that I want to share with you. We're going to conclude, as always, with evidence-based recommendations, and that's going to be how you're going to turn the learning into action. So let's get started. So why is this topic important? It's important because we have a fundamental need to belong in a social group. Maintaining meaningful and satisfying social activity is critical to successful aging, and we need to know this either for ourselves or the people that we love or take care of. One really important message that I want you to hear from me today is that social health makes an undervalued contribution to brain health. Many of the brain fitness products that are on the market today are designed to be done by people alone in their house, and this is just wrong. The things that are going to help us most involve being with other people. Many of the things that truly help brain health have a strong social component, and I want to teach you all about that. One of the most interesting aspects of psychology to me has always been evolutionary psychology, thinking about how our thinking patterns and our behaviors have been shaped over millions and millions of years. So I want to start off by just going through some of the theories about why it is that we're such a socially based creature. The first theory is based in safety in numbers. The idea is that we were much more likely to survive if we were surrounded by a social group, not all by ourselves out in the wilderness at risk for predators. The next theory is based on food scarcity, and the idea is that people working together can supply an adequate diet that leads to more survival. One person trying to fulfill all the nutritional needs for themselves is not likely to be very successful. However, if we work in small groups and one person brings one good to the table and another person brings something else, all together we can make a balanced diet and we're much more likely to be able to survive. Those two theories date back quite a bit. What social scientists now think is that the social animal started because of the need to learn and share important information. This is part of why we developed a system of language. We have to communicate ideas that are essential for survival from person to person. This is how we benefit from years of experience, and everyone is not starting out reinventing the wheel, so to speak. The ability to share and learn new information, all the way from survival techniques, what berries not to eat, all the way up to technical innovations, is really at the heart of human culture. I want to tell you about a really cool theory put forth by a scientist named Dr. Dunbar in the early 80s, and it's called the social brain hypothesis. I want you to take a look at this graph here. It's either included in your companion workbook or you can see it now on the screen. And what Dunbar's theory says that as brain size increases, so does group size. Now what we have here is a chicken or the egg phenomenon. What we don't know is that do we need a bigger brain to manage more people, or can we manage more people because we have a bigger brain? Either way, what we know is that more and more social interactions is related to a bigger brain. And what you can see here as you look across different species is that the larger the social group, the bigger the brain. Dunbar's theory is based in the idea that we require greater brain power to keep track of who is doing what and with whom. So let's talk about those brain areas that are bigger as social groups increase. The two parts of the brain that they're talking about are the prefrontal cortex and the orbital frontal cortex. These parts of the brain are essential for things like planning and anticipating other people and our own behavior. Given the size of the average human brain, Dunbar would predict that each of us have a social group around 150. And if you think of all the friends and family that you have, it's pretty amazing that you will typically wind up on a number very close to that. The bottom line is that our brain is essentially wired to deal with a large and complex social network. Social health gives us essential mental stimulation that keeps brain cells active and firing and communicating. If we miss the opportunity to enhance this aspect of our brain's health, we're really not doing everything that we can do. And that's what this brain series has been all about. I wanted to teach you exactly the steps that you can take to truly improve the quality of your brain. This lecture is a really important one. Now, in order to be successful on a social level, you really need 5 essential skills. And let's look at those in more detail. You can think about it as being related to the acronym CARES. The first skill is that we need to know how to cooperate with other people. We can't just always get what it is we want, and we also can't let other people railroad us and get exactly what it is they want. We have to understand the art of give and take. The A in CARES relates to assertion. This is that sweet spot of being assertive that we've talked about before. It's very important that we recognize the wants and needs that we have within ourselves and that we communicate them effectively to other people. The R is about responsibility. If we never take responsibility, we're not able to grow and change and learn from past mistakes. It's essential that we can sometimes look at our behaviors and recognize that we didn't do our best, or maybe in fact we were downright misguided. Without the ability to take responsibility, it's very hard to function optimally as a social person. E stands for empathy. This is the psychological ability to identify with other people, to imagine what it is that they're thinking and feeling. The final social skill is self-control. This is really important, and again, we all know some people who are either masters in this or maybe have a lot to learn. The idea is that we can have impulses that we can inhibit, that not every thought comes out of our mouth, not every feeling that we have is acted upon. That's an essential part of what our frontal lobes do, and it's our prefrontal cortex that really separates us from other animals. That's the part of the brain that really helps us hold back. It's a critical skill when we want to function successfully with other people. Now, I just talked with you about empathy. I want to take that a step further and talk to you about something called theory of mind. This is a really interesting psychological concept, but it's also a brain skill. Theory of mind is an extension of empathy, and it's really the ability to put ourselves into someone else's shoes and to really understand what it is that they're thinking or how they see things from their unique vantage point. This is particularly the case when other people have states of feelings or thoughts that are different from our own. It's the ability to understand that just because we have certain feelings, it doesn't mean that other people have those same feelings. So let's talk about how exactly it is that we get this information into our brain. I want you to look at this picture here on your screen, and what it's going to teach you is that empathy and theory of mind is all about perception of the eyes and the mouth. What we have here is a research study based on something called eye tracking. It's a really interesting tool for understanding visual perception. Now, sometimes we forget that the eyes are actually an extension of the brain, and they're very accessible. So a lot of brain scientists focus on the eyes as a way to infer what's going on in other parts of the brain. This is a study that was done in 2014. What it did was it showed research participants this particular face. It used eye tracking technology to track where it was that their eyes specifically focused. They purposefully used an emotional face. If you look at this young woman, what are your thoughts about what she's feeling? Some people might say surprised, some people might say scared. Either way, it's an emotionally provocative picture. What this research suggests is that when we interact with other people, particularly when they're showing us a strong emotion, we're really focusing on the eyes and the mouth to gather that information. So the areas that you can see in orange or red are the areas of the greatest intensity of focus. The yellow areas are the next most frequently looked at parts, and the green are the third most commonly looked at areas. So what I want you to see there is how much focus is on the eyes. There's been a number of studies looking at gaze abnormalities in children and adults who have autism-related disorders. Now, you might know a little bit about autism, but one thing you might not know is that a lot of these individuals have difficulty extracting emotional information from other people's faces. And some brain scientists think that at its heart, autism is a theory of mind disorder. What I want you to look at in this slide is the difference between these two data sets. The one on the left is from a typically developing child, and the one on the right is from a child with autism spectrum disorder. What you can see is that the one on the left pays a lot of attention to the eyes. What you can see on the one on the right is that the eye patterns are a little bit more random, and there's actually almost no focusing in on the areas that most neurotypically developing children are getting all the emotional information from, the eyes and the mouth. We actually have a brain structure that is specialized specifically for perceiving and remembering faces. It's called the fusiform gyrus, and I want you to see a picture of it in this slide here. Brain studies that involve functional imaging, which is a type of brain scan where you can actually track and record brain activity as it happens, tells us that this part of the brain lights up, particularly when we see a familiar face. We're going to remember that when we get to the recommendations. Because the brain is so hardwired to perceive faces, you've probably noticed that we tend to see faces in everything. And there is a scientific name for this. It's called pareidolia. And if you look at these three slides here, I think they're pretty cute. So we can see faces in anything from a series of vegetables set up to leaves to even fire hydrants. We're very predisposed to seeing two eyes and a nose in all sorts of ambiguous environments. That's because the face is such a critically important part of our social nature. One of the things that I know is concerning to older adults is how modern society is changing. And one of the things that I think concerns them most is that we are having less and less face-to-face social interaction. People are relying much more on things like smartphones to communicate, things like Facebook and social media, and some people feel that this has become a replacement for true one-on-one, face-to-face social interactions. The research does support this, unfortunately, and it does seem that our face-to-face interactions are declining. So, for example, a study that came out in 2006 showed that we belong to fewer organizations, attend less meetings, attend less family dinners, talk to our neighbors less, have less and less friends visiting us at home, and we have fewer close friends that we talk to about our private-most thoughts. Most of us report that we have a lot of social acquaintances, but what really matters in terms of social health is your close social group. So how do we define good social connection? We need to define something if we're going to try to achieve it. There are several components that contribute to a good, healthy, strong sense of social connection. And let's go through those together. There are 7 questions that you can ask yourself about your own social circle or somebody that you care about to get at the answer to this question. The first one is, how long have we known the person? Now, this isn't the end-all be-all because certainly we come across people in our lives that we instantly feel close to, but the truth is the longer you've known someone, the more we tend to trust them, which is an essential part of feeling connected. The next question is, how often do we see these people? Now again, again, not a hard and fast rule. Sometimes we can see people twice a year. We pick up with them immediately as if we had not had any break in our time together. However, the truth is for many of us, the more frequent we see someone, the closer we feel to them. The next question is, how much knowledge do you have about another person's personal interests, desires, or goals? Remember that it's not just about us in terms of social health. It's really about how much we also know about the other person. The next one has to do with physical intimacy or closeness. Greater social connection happens the more physically intimate we are with other people. Now, as we all know, there's a range of physical intimacy, but what they're talking about in these studies are people that you would feel comfortable giving a hug to or holding if they were in distress. The next question is about self-disclosure. How much of yourself and your private thoughts are you sharing with that particular person? This relates to the next essential question, which is how much do we really believe that we can trust this person to help us in a time of need? This is an absolutely critical part of social connection. We all have people in our lives that we might enjoy, but we know if the chips were down, we probably couldn't count on them to help us. And the final one is, how familiar is any given person with the rest of your social circle? Have they met your family? Do you know their other friends? Do you have integration with them and the rest of your social world? The difference between isolation and loneliness is a theme in this program, and it's something I'm going to talk about a couple times because it's just that important. More than 43% of older adults in one study reported that they often felt left out, isolated, or felt that they were lacking in companionship. In a 6-year follow-up study, 45% of these people had a greater risk of dying earlier than the older adults who said they felt more socially connected. Now, 63% of the people in this study who said that they felt lonely were married or were living with a spouse. So what that tells us is it doesn't necessarily mean that living in the same home with someone is a total cure-all for not feeling lonely. Now, this is very individual for each person, and I think it depends a lot on our personality, the degree of introversion and extroversion that we have, and also our time of life. We go through all sorts of different phases throughout our life in terms of our need of being social versus spending time alone. So what's important is that each person is really thinking thoughtfully and being honest with themselves about what their true social needs are. Now, I think we have to address something here related to possible ageism, because I know that there are people that are out there listening, or they care about someone in their life who maybe wants to be more social, but there are real barriers in their life for being as engaged as they truly desire to be. So the question is, does aging create barriers towards social health? What the research tells us is limited mobility that can sometimes happen as we age absolutely is a barrier to physically getting out in the world and engaging in tasks that we used to enjoy. Hearing loss is probably the #1 reason that people stop participating in group activities. So friends and families aren't as close geographically as they once were. This, of course, makes it harder for us to get together in face-to-face interactions. There's also the very real problem of a lack of transportation as we get older. Now, this can sometimes be due to cognitive impairment, meaning that a doctor might have advised us or a loved one that it's not really safe to drive anymore, either due to concerns about getting confused behind the wheel or maybe reduced ability to react quickly. But the other thing that affects driving are things like age-related vision loss. Many older adults have things like macular degeneration and glaucoma, cataracts that haven't been removed yet, and these issues are very real barriers towards getting out in the world safely. Sometimes there are financial constraints, and we find ourselves on a fixed income as we get older, and we might not have the money to do the things that we would like to do. When we get to the recommendations, I want you to rethink this, because there really are so many things that are either free or low cost within your community that you could replace the cost-related activities with. The next barrier as we get older can sometimes be retirement. When we're working, we are forced to be in a social context. We're interacting with people all day long, and sometimes because this is provided directly to us, we don't engage with other parts of our social world. Sometimes we can let friendships fade away, we're not as in touch with our family, and we might find after retirement that we're not seeing nearly as many people every day as we once did. We might even feel like we've lost some social skills in knowing how to interact with people. But the great news is you can retrain yourself to get right back on board. The final barrier is widowhood. For many of us, we've spent many years with a companion that was a perfect fit, and sometimes maybe even not a perfect fit, but we did everything together. When you find yourself a widow, sometimes it can be really hard to get out there in the world, and it can feel like everything is going on between couples. Everywhere you can look, you're looking at people that are walking hand in hand together. It can just feel new and different, and we have to learn new coping skills for getting out in the world. But it's not all bad and it's not all barriers. Research also tells us that there's positive things that happen to us socially as we get older. Specifically, we learn how to let go of non-essential relationships. We stop trying with people who've shown us time and time again that we're probably not going to get anywhere in terms of building trust and true intimacy. We learn how to solve social conflicts more efficiently, more effectively. We know the things to say that comfort people, and we know the things not to say that may aggravate people. Let's talk about the impact of social health on all the other aspects of health: physical, mental, and cognitive. We're first going to focus on physical health, and there's a huge body of research to support a direct relationship between physical health and social health. So I've pulled out what I think is some of the most interesting and compelling data, and I want to share that with you in this slide. Time and time again, research tells us that having a more diverse social network with frequent contact is associated with better physical health, including greater immunity to infectious disease, better cardiovascular health, better pulmonary or breathing health, less whole body inflammation, less cognitive symptoms. People who are more socially connected live longer. The influence of social relationships on the risk for death is comparable to that of drinking or smoking. We are our social network. Our health behaviors mirror the people closest to us. What this means is that we are spending time with people who engage in non-healthful activities, we have a very strong likelihood of picking up those same habits. Now, this also goes for healthy behaviors. So, for example, if you hang out with people that smoke, what the research says is that over time, you very well may become a smoker. Now, if you hang out with people that like to go for a walk every day after dinner, chances are you're going to adopt this positive health behavior. So you really have to take seriously who it is that you're spending your time with. This is really played out in married couples, and when researchers look at the behavior of married people, what they find is that they're very, very similar in the amount of exercise that they do, the types of diet that they have, their approach to weight management, smoking, and drinking. The impact on mental health is so important. Now, remember what I said earlier. It is the perceived availability of our social network that matters most. Some people are perfectly content with one really tried and true friend. And for other people, they would not feel good unless they had 10 to 20 people that they considered very close friends. What we know is that emotional support buffers the effects of chronic stress. Chronic stress is a very important aspect of brain health, and I hope you joined us for that lecture because there was so much to learn. People who get together regularly with family and friends are 50% less likely to report symptoms of depression than those who have little face-to-face contact. Older adults who met with family and friends face-to-face at least 3 times per week had the lowest level of depression, estimated to be around 7%. In contrast, older adults who met up just once every few months had a 12% higher chance of meeting criteria for a clinical depression. So let's get really specific on the effects of social health on brain health. And I want you to look at this picture here. This is a very common experimental setup to understand the effects of environment on the brain. What we have on the left is a mouse who's been raised all by him or herself, all alone in a very unstimulating environment. What we have on the right is a mouse who's been paired with other mouse friends, who's got all sorts of ways to interact with the environment. After a few weeks or months of living these lifestyles, they sacrifice the animals and look into their brain. A lot of what we know about the human brain has been extrapolated from animal research. We can't exactly go around doing these same things to other human beings. But what I want you to notice here is the difference in the richness of the brain cells between those mice who lived alone versus the ones that lived with other mice. The animals that were afforded a much more socially robust lifestyle have much healthier brain cells. I want you to think of a typical exchange between two people, and I want you to really appreciate how cognitively complex it is for us to engage in back and forth social interaction. And to illustrate this point, I want you to think about this research study. In 2008, Ybarra and his colleagues did a research study in which they had participants assigned to one of three groups: a social group that participated just in a group discussion, an intellectual activities group that solved puzzles, or a control group that simply watched a television clip. After these activities, they tested these participants' mental abilities, and what they found was that those who spent their time socializing scored the highest, suggesting that there's an immediate brain benefit to spending time with other people. The rate of cognitive decline was 70% less in people with frequent contact than those lower in social activities, according to a 2011 study by James and colleagues. Women with larger social networks were 26% less likely to develop dementia than those with smaller social networks, according to a 2008 study. So how is it that social health so directly impacts brain health? Well, let's talk about three possible ways that this happens. The first one is active engagement. Stimulated brain cells are going to be happy and productive brain cells. They're going to grow new branches. They're going to fire more successfully. We're going to see more enhanced blood flow in the brain. And what researchers really think is the benefit is that it reduces the amount of time that the older adult brain is left what they call unfocused. What this means is the idea that they're sitting there with a lot of passive information coming to them. When we interact with other people, we have to be on our toes. We have to be sharp. We have to be able to listen and also contribute. This is a very cognitively demanding task. This is very mentally stimulating. This process increases that cognitive reserve that we keep talking about. Being social absolutely is a way to make deposits in your brain bank every day. The last way that we think being social helps is that it reduces our stress hormones. We know that over time, an elevated amount of stress hormones in the body accelerates the aging process, and that it's particularly harmful to the cells in the memory centers of our brain. Being with other people is typically a stress reliever, particularly when we're spending time with people that we truly enjoy. I want to talk to you about the importance of where we live as we get older. I have worked in all sorts of contexts, from people's homes to nursing facilities to continuing care retirement communities, and I feel like I have a pretty good sense of the quality of life that's offered in all of these different contexts. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is that I think this is a very personal decision, and it's absolutely up to the individual and the people that they trust and love most dearly to make this important decision. But I do want you to think about a couple things. Where we live really matters. The majority of research suggests that people who live in their homes as they grow older are a bit more lonesome than people that live in structured communities like a life plan community or a continuing care retirement community. Research suggests that older adults are better able to establish new relationships when they're surrounded by people of their own age. Retirement communities offer older adults social connection directly within their reach. They have professionals on staff whose sole job is to provide the highest quality of life to residents. There's often very well-funded life enrichment programs, and the whole purpose is to bring activities that are stimulating and satisfying directly within access to the people that live there. This can include things like group fitness activities, trips, lectures that take place in the community, opportunities for people to gather who are banded together by similar interests. Two of the most important services that are offered in retirement communities, in my opinion, are group meals and spiritual services that are offered on site. One of the most distressing parts of getting older for some people, particularly when there's transportation issues, is that they're no longer able to participate in their spiritual services like they would like to. Many retirement communities are faith-based, and they have worship ceremonies offered directly on site. Further, clergy frequently visit with residents of these communities to make sure that their individual spiritual needs are being attended to. That second very positive social gathering that occurs in retirement communities surrounds food. Think about the whole concept of breaking bread together. Many brain scientists believe that we have hundreds of years of experience of eating food together, and that meals should be a fundamentally social time, a time for us to interact with other people and enjoy the fellowship that they have to offer. What can happen sometimes when we're more isolated is that we tend to eat meals by ourselves. This is also concerning from a nutritional standpoint because I've heard many of my patients say, well, if I'm just cooking for myself, I'm not really going to go to all the trouble. And people will find themselves eating things like canned soups and sandwiches night after night. Retirement communities typically offer excellent meal planning to allow people to have a high-quality diet, but it's that social piece that I particularly love. In doing this program in person in the retirement communities in North Carolina, one of the most powerful things that residents have shared with me as a result of this brain health series is that now they are going down to the dining hall to enjoy every meal with other people in their community. It's a fairly straightforward step that will truly result in better brain health. Now we're going to transition to the recommendation part of our lecture. Remember, this is where you're going to turn all of that learning into action. The first thing I want you to do is take stock of your current social health. And I want you to ask yourself if you truly value the social aspect of your life. We often think of a healthy life as being made up of a good diet and exercise. I want you to think of social health as just important as those other aspects of your health. I want you to value social time as more than just mere enjoyment. Sometimes we can fall into the trap of thinking that being social is even somewhat frivolous, that it's something that I do once all the hard work is really done. What I hope I've taught you today is that that's just not true. It's intrinsically valuable, particularly for brain health, that we remain vitally socially connected. And remember that being around people is a great way to increase your cognitive reserve. You really are using those principles of brain plasticity when you interact with other people. That's because, as we've said, people are complicated and they definitely keep us on our toes. I want you to spend some time reflecting on your social capital or the social capital of someone that you care about. What I mean when I say that is your social life as it stands right now consistent truly with your values and interests? Are you truly as socially engaged as you would like to be? I want you to think about how much as it stands now that you participate or somebody that you care about participates in shared group activities. There's tracking sheets in the workbook where I want you to look at your life as it is now and really get clear about how many times per week you're spending in a social group. I want you to think about how much you interact with other people, particularly people that you feel close to, and remember, that feeling of trusting someone else is critical to a feeling of good, strong social connection. I want you to reflect on how many people in your life that you really feel that you can trust. If you come up with a number that you're not happy with or makes you feel sad, I want you to take the steps to change that. We have to take responsibility for our own happiness and work within our means. Yes, you might not be able to do the things as you once did, but you have to fight back and try to be as actively involved as you possibly can, particularly when it comes to spending time with other people. I want you to think about finding your unique village, finding people that share very similar interests and values as you. This can be another benefit of retirement community living, because out of the dozens or hundreds of people that you might be living with, surely there are groups of people that you are very compatible with. You just have to make the effort to find them. You might want to get in touch with the director of independent living of a given retirement community to ask them what specific activities would be a good match for you or somebody that you care about. Remember, there are professionals on site who are paid to do this exact thing, to bring in community-based resources to put them directly within your reach. If you don't live in a retirement community, I want you to look around and find the local senior enrichment center if you're over about the age of 60. Again, these can offer really interesting and vibrant and complex social activities that you might really enjoy being a part of. I want to encourage you to go down there, get the calendar, get a highlighter, highlight things that you might be interested in, and really commit to attending. At least go once or twice to see if it's a good match with you. You really might surprise yourself. Depending on the activity that they offer, you might even get a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1. You get to be around people, you can engage in a physical activity or a mentally stimulating activity. But what I care about for the purpose of this lecture is that you are prioritizing spending face-to-face time with people that matter to you. I want you to be flexible in the way you think about your social participation. Now, it may very well be true that you cannot physically engage in things that you like just as well as you did 5, 10, or maybe even 20 years ago. The biggest danger that I see there is that you would stop engaging in this activity completely. I want you to still do it as much as you possibly can. You don't want to give it up completely because then you're not going to get any of those benefits. That entire brain network that you had dedicated to that activity is not going to be stimulated anymore. And remember what we know about brain cells. They need stimulation in order to thrive. So even if you can't do it just like you did before, please find a way to participate on some level. I want you to prioritize face-to-face contact with other people. Now, of course, talking on the phone is satisfying, but what the research tells us is that we really need that back and forth eye contact. Remember the eye tracking study where we learned that we get so much social information from interpreting people's subtle eye movements and the way that their mouth turns? There's no way to get that from a phone. If you care about an older adult, this is a really important message for you. So many families of my patients come to me and say, I want to be helpful to my mom. I genuinely want to help my older sister, but I don't know what to do. What you need to do is spend more face-to-face time with the person. Now, if that's not possible geographically, you can use tools like FaceTime to be able to look at each other. Remember, the research suggested that the best benefit is when older adults had social interaction with people close to them at least 3 times per week. That can be your guide for how many times you might want to have those interactions. I want you to try to eat most of your meals with other people. If you're living in a retirement community, I want you to make the effort to go down to the dining hall for almost every meal. If you're in the community, I want you to make the effort to reach out to your neighbors or a friend and try to have a lot of your meals together. It's a fundamentally social time, and it always has been. It's a great chance to get together with people and update them on what's going on with you and listen to the things that are important to them. And don't forget about reciprocity. reciprocity. Social health is not just about how other people help us. It's also our responsibility to reach out to other people. So take stock of your social circle and think about, is there someone that maybe has been a little bit lonesome recently? Maybe something like becoming a widow or even retiring, and make an effort to reach out to that person and let them know that you are thinking of them. That's our lecture for today. Thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.